Hi, I'm Brad Cypert of bradcypert.com, and today we're going to try to do something that has been a long time coming. So I used to write a lot of Python code, and a long time ago I wrote an article called Writing a RESTful API in Flask and SQLAlchemy. This is still by far the most popular article on my blog. I don't write Python anymore. I have no idea why Google is sending Pythonistas to me. But I've had a lot of requests recently to update the content of this post so that it works with the latest versions of Python and Flask and SQLAlchemy. So our goal today is to take this Python 2.7 project and convert it to Python 3, whatever the latest is, and get it up and running again. So I will make a couple concessions. First, I never wrote a RESTful API to begin with. I thought I knew what RESTful was when I wrote this. We're going to call it RESTish, as in kind of REST, because it is kind of REST, but it's not truly RESTful. So we'll refer to this article a little bit as we go. We'll look at some open source projects for just a second. Actually, let's close those. So I have this project here. So I'm going to keep this config file. I'm going to go ahead and delete this server. I was playing around with this earlier to make sure that this was something that would actually work. And it does seem like it's going to work, but I'm still not completely sure at this moment. But if we look at the blog post, we're just going to follow through. So the very first thing it says is, hey, this is deprecated. Hopefully not for long. So this uses Python 2.7. We're going to use latest. I can cd into Python 3 API. So I'm using PyEnv to run a virtual Python environment 3.8.1, which is, as far as I know, latest for Python 3. So with that in mind, we can come in here and we can just go ahead and copy this over and paste it right here. This shouldn't change between our Python versions, so that should be fairly straightforward. So I'll go back to this for a second if anyone's copying along. And yeah, you can see here that we're importing our OS. We set a variable of our base directory equal to an absolute path on our OS for this file directory, or the directory that this file is contained within, which would be our Python 3 API folder. We set up a SQLite URI called app.sqlite. I've ran this once, so it's generated it for me right over here. And then SQLAlchemy migrate repo. So we'll have to run migrations to populate the database. So that's what that's setting that up for. Perfect. So we copied this over. So this is called flask.py. We're actually going to change the name of this. That's a very bad name. I would not name any of my Python files after the library that's being used for them. So we're just going to call this server.py instead this time. And we should be able to probably copy all of this and give it a shot. Unable to import Flask. Okay. We'll get back to that in just a second. So we'll go ahead and copy that. We'll also copy our class, and we're going to clean this up a little bit just to keep it simple. We're just going to do a name. Yeah, we're just going to do a name and an ID. Oh, no semicolons. Okay, so this is basically creating a new model that ties directly to our database. The model is called developer. It'll store stuff in the SQLite table, and we'll use that later as we build out our API. So we need to add one more thing. We need to add our init function to the class. Oops. So we can just paste this. We tossed hire date and focus, so we're just going to set name. That means that we can remove these here as well. We're just doing this to keep things simple. You can get into the complexities of whatever data structures you want to add to your own database in time, but the goal is to make this as simple as possible so someone can hit the ground running and have a working example that they can build upon. Cool. So we probably should start to debug these issues. Unable to import Flask. Unable to import Flask extension SQLAlchemy. So, okay, so the first thing is let's pull up the Flask docs and make sure that we're still doing this right, because this could have changed in Python from Flask, import Flask. Nope, it looks like it's still the same in Python 3. Okay. That's fine. Unable to import Flask. So pip install Flask. Oh yeah, sorry. Pip install U, and it's capital F on the Flask. So we're gonna let this run really quick. This is gonna download our Flask dependency. Hopefully, it's not gonna be super sassy anymore. Okay, cool. So that part worked, which is awesome. So we need Flask extension SQLAlchemy. I have a hunch that package has changed since then. I don't think that pattern is as common. Yeah, so it looks like it's been renamed to Flask-SQLAlchemy. So we can pip install this as well. Oh, it looks like it is still yelling at us about Python 2. Pip 3, which pip, user local bin pip. Oh, okay. That's no good. I'm pretty sure, sorry, there's a configure the shell environment pyenv init. So we're just gonna run this guy really quick. Which pip? Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna, sorry, that's a little confusing. So I'm using, I have Python 2.7 installed on my machine still, and I am using Python 3.8 using a tool called pyenv, which gives you a virtual Python environment. This allows me to write Python code using whatever version of Python I want without conflicting with the version that ships with my operating system, which is 2.7 something. So what I had to do right there is I basically told this terminal to use the pyenv for source, which is a command that pyenv gives you. So if you noticed, when I typed which pip up here, this pointed to user local bin pip. This is the pip that my Mac OS has, which I don't want to use. And then I sourced it. So I said, hey, use this as the source. And then I typed which pip here, and you'll see that it has updated. So we're going to reinstall the Flask one. Hey, look, it's not yelling at us about an out-of-date Python version, which is great. So the other one was Flask SQLAlchemy. Let's just go ahead and install that again. Awesome. So we know that this has changed. We can see that it's changed here in our documentation. So instead of, okay, I'm just going to copy the whole line if it won't let me copy the little piece. So instead of flask.ext.SQLAlchemy, it's flask_SQLAlchemy now. And we're going to import SQLAlchemy here. SQLAlchemy has no member column. Okay, so we say db SQLAlchemy app. Interesting. I'm not sure why it's complaining about that just yet. SQLAlchemy has no integer member. So we have Flask SQLAlchemy import SQLAlchemy. And then we're following the same pattern here, which is db column. Weird. Oh, okay. Oh no, it's back. So strange. You know what I'm gonna try to do really quick? Oh, it's not called hello.py. Sorry, we called ours server.py. So I just want to try to run this really quick and see if I can get a stack trace. So it's running on localhost 5000. No URL found. Okay, cool. I'm going to ignore these errors for now. We might run into them and we can troubleshoot them in a moment, but I also think my editor might just be a little confused with the Python 2.7 to Python 3.8 swap that we just did. So let's go back to the original post and let's go ahead and add our first route. So I'm pretty sure that this hasn't changed at all. So we should just be able to paste this. And I do think I have to kill the server and rerun it. So let's try this again. And this was /dev/git. So we'll probably run into an interesting error here. Yeah, internal server error. Okay, so select developer.id as developer ID and developer.name as developer name. No such table developer. Okay, this makes sense. That's because our app SQLite file is completely empty. So what we're gonna do now is we will come in to our browser and I'm gonna pull up, oh, interesting, it's now owned by palettes. Flask-Migrate, I think that's just what it's called, is Flask-Migrate. Yeah, okay, so same thing. So we'll go to our server. Oops, I'm sorry. We'll go here, we'll pip install Flask-Migrate. Cool. And then from here, we can import migrate from Flask-Migrate. And then I think the next step would just be this guy, which is saying migrate equals migrate app and DB. So I'll give this a second. I'm actually gonna run it instead of running it here. I will run it here, I think. Okay, cool, that carried over, I'm shocked. This is development server, do not use it in production. Okay, that looks fine. Oh no, we're still getting an internal server error. No such table developer. Okay, so it looks like that didn't do what we wanted it to do just yet. Oh, I should read the rest of the documentation. So in this case, we just need to run, oops, flask db init. Okay, so it looks like it might be done. So let's see, it created a migrations. It has a Limbic, which is a database library for Python. It has an m.py, readme, versions. Okay, cool. So then you can generate your initial migration. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So we can now say, sure, we'll call this initial migration. Okay. So it's db migrate. And we do have to point it to our Flask app here. So in our case, Flask app server pi. Migrate m initial migration. Cool. Okay, so it's created an initial migration. So we will go ahead and take a look at this and try to remember how to write a migration for SQLite. Okay, so cool. If we open the SQLite DB, you can see that there's some stuff already added, which is helpful. It's nice to know that it's already created it. Oh, cool. This is actually, that's really nice. It wrote my initial migration for me, which is really cool. You'll notice that it drops table. So that's kind of dangerous. You might want to override this to something that's safer or whatever your business or API needs are. But the idea remains, you just can come in here and migrate or update this migration. And then to run it, it looks like we just say db migrate. So kind of the same thing. Target database is not up to date. Oh, I'm sorry, it might be db upgrade. Yeah, so it says running upgrade, and then right here, you can see that's the hash in the initial migration. So if we look at our SQLite file, you'll see that it won't load anymore. But you'll also see that we actually have an ID, a name, and a primary key, and that's our user table. So we can go into our server pi again, and yeah, I'm really sorry about these the error underlines. It seems to be working, so I'm not sure entirely where that's coming from. But so if we run this again and we go here, but so it's an empty array. That's not super helpful, but everything is up and running, and we do have a connection to our database. So now we can go back to the article, and we're going to go ahead and update this guy. So this is going to be really straightforward. In fact, I don't think we have any changes to make here. So this one will take in an ID. You'll notice that it's /dev/integer. We can go ahead and test that, but it's also going to return nothing because, yep, developer is null, because we have no developers in our database. So we'll go back to the article really quick. And yeah, we'll add this one. So this will be an important one. This is how we're going to create a dev. So we'll be able to post to this dev endpoint, and we will add a new dev. We don't have higher date or focus anymore. We remove those to try to keep things simpler. Excuse me. So we just say dev equals developer, request.json.name. So if there's not request.json or not name in request.json abort, I actually think we'll have to update this in just a second, but I'm going to test it out without updating it just to see. And then we have db.session.add, db.session.commit. So adding it says, hey, start a transaction that includes this, and then commit says flush that transaction, and push that data to our actual database. So if we try to run this, cool. So we have to do a post request. I can't do those from Chrome, but what we can do is we can go post localhost 500 dev, and name equals Brad. Okay. So let's see. Where did this fail? Dict object has no attribute name. Okay, yeah, so this request.json does not have an attribute for name. So I think this is a Python 3 thing. So Python 3 key in dictionary. Super not helpful. Is no longer available. You should use key name in dictionary. Okay, that's what we're doing. If not request.json or not name in request.json, that is where it's failing, right? On line 34. Oh, request.name. Interesting. Did they might have changed how you get values out of a dictionary in Python 3. I really hope not. That was so easy. Oh, yeah. Would you look at that? Let's try this instead. That's funny. And yeah, like I've said, I haven't touched Python in a very long time. I've just had a lot of requests. Sorry, wrong endpoint. Just had a lot of requests to update this. So I figured I would circle back and give it a shot and see if I could update it. Object of type developer is not JSON serializable. Well, why not? Yeah, I'm actually really curious as to why it's not serializable. I'm just trying something for a second. So we should have an ID there, right? So I'm curious if we run this again and we run this guy right here. Yeah, object of type developer is not JSON serializable. What am I doing wrong? It's not JSON serializable in Flask. Oh, do I really have to add a custom serializer to this now? My, how the times have changed. Okay, so all we really want is, and this will be self.name, and ID is ID, that's fine. Let's give this a shot. I'm shocked that we hadn't run into that issue yet. I know that we haven't had any data, but it still feels like it should have told us that it wasn't able to serialize things. Yeah, it looks like, oh, you know what? Dev.serialize. Let's try that. Hey, look at that. Yeah, that definitely has changed. I remember writing this originally, and part of the reason I really liked Flask and SQLAlchemy and Python was just the fact that this all just kind of worked on its own. And I didn't have to do stuff like write a serializer. So we have an idea for, so if we hit dev, what do we get back? An internal server error. Okay, and so that'll be because these aren't serialized, I guess. So in theory, we should be able to serialize this one. Man, that feels terrible compared to the way it used to feel. And I could just be doing something wrong. If I am, someone please leave a comment and let me know. So that works for that one. Is there a Python 3 map function? There's got to be. Takes in a function and an iterator. Okay, cool. Actually, the syntax for that's not bad. So we'll say map. And then we take in a lambda. And then that lambda has a dev. And we say dev.serialize. And then, oh, oops, I'm writing that in the wrong spot, aren't I? Okay, so we can leave that one for now. And in this one, we'll do map lambda dev.serialize. And then we should be able to call it like that. Let's give this a shot. So let me make sure this works, and then I'll go back and explain it. Oh no, it still didn't work. Object of type map is not JSON serializable. Does that not do what I expected it to do? Oh, I have to, ugh. That's really annoying. So I have to, I think, cast that to a list as well. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of frustrating. So this has definitely changed since the last time that I wrote the original post. So what we had to do here is we defined a custom serialize class method. And then in our simplest case, we call it here right after we create the dev. This returns just a dictionary with our keys and values for us. And then in get dev, we do the same thing. We get our dev and then we serialize it. And then in the list, it's a little more complicated. So we get all of our developers and we pass that to the map function. The map function takes in an iterable over here, the developer.query.all. and then it takes in a lambda or an anonymous function. So our lambda, all it does is called dev.serialize, where dev is the parameter. So this will iterate through the entire list of developers that we query and then call serialize on them. And that's what the map function is doing for us here. Finally, we convert that to a list because we can't serialize or we can't JSONify the map. So we just use the list function here to convert that map to a list. And then that gets us a working page. Cool. So that gives us our create dev. We're going to add our delete dev. This one should be really straightforward. In fact, I think we're good to copy it and just paste it. Oh, except they're called users here, aren't they? Man, I have made so many typos over the years while blogging. Developer.query.get. So, okay. So what this does, we get an ID from the URL here. When it is a delete, we query for the developer at that ID. We say db.session.delete, and then we flush that. And then finally, we just return JSONify result true. That's not very RESTful. This is why I'm saying RESTish. You probably want to do something more RESTful here if you're sticking true to RESTful patterns. So that should work. So we're going to go ahead and run it. And then we will go to Insomnia, which is a GraphQL client. I'm going to duplicate this request. We'll just call it my request delete. And the ID that we saw was 4. And we don't need to pass a body. It's just a delete. Method not allowed. Oh no. So we have methods delete dev. Oh, you know what? I think the issue is because I had an extra slash. Hey, would you look at that? So yeah, something to be aware of. The slashes matter in your app routes. So we're going to keep this one consistent with all the others. So we'll add a slash right here. You can see that we've removed that dev, ideally. It says results true, so we trust our server. You probably want better logic in place to make sure that that actually happens. But you can also query devs now, and you can see 1, 2, and 3, and our 4th one is gone. Okay, cool. So the last thing we have to do is handle updates. So yet again, grabbing this from my blog post from many years ago. So we're going to handle puts. And we're just going to get all of these values. So you'll have to pass in everything in this case. But thankfully, everything is just a name since we've trimmed it down. So this will be the same thing as before. We return JSONify dev.serialize is what we called it. So yeah, one of the nice things here is that we can say dev.name equals request.json.name, and then we can just say commit our changes, and it will update our underlying data structure for us. So if we terminate this and we run it again, and we go to something like Insomnia, we switched over to a put. We're going to update 3, and we're going to say name is equal to Bradley. Let's change this. 400 bad request. Oh no. Dev/3. The browser or proxy sent a request that the server cannot understand. Oh, does this need to be? Yeah, it does. Oof. Yeah, just make sure your keys are strings in valid JSON. I've been writing too much JavaScript where that's not necessarily the case. So yeah, this will update our ID. So in theory, if we search for it now, sorry, you gotta have your slashes, and it doesn't need to be a put, it needs to be a get. You can see that we have Brad, and the newly updated Bradley. So this gives us a put, a delete, create via post, and 2 different gets that we can leverage to build out Flask APIs. So finally, I suppose you could use this, but the documentation for Flask specifically tells you to run it like this. So I'm just going to stick with whatever the modern documentation tells me. I don't know enough about Python anymore. I don't keep up on it enough to be able to tell you any alternatives on how you should run your Python apps. So the final product will be here. I'm going to update the blog post to include all of the final content as well. And I'm really excited about this. If you're interested, well, if you're watching this, you probably already have seen this or are interested. I'm going to put the video at the top of the post. So if you want to walk through exactly how I did what I did and some of the struggles that I went through, and you can kind of see the areas that, as someone who used to write a lot of Python but doesn't write Python anymore, some of the areas that I really struggled with too. So if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and it lets me know what type of content you enjoy seeing from me. So if more people are interested in blog posts, I'll put out more blog posts. If more people are interested in YouTube content, I'll put out more YouTube content. I really want to focus more on content creation in 2020, and I really want it to be valuable to people. And if it's not valuable, I'm not going to waste my time doing it. So if you like this, let me know. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.